You're watching HuffPost Live. I'm Ricky Camilleri. Now that the federal court has decided Detroit's bankruptcy case can move forward, city employees are left with a harsh reality. They could lose their pensions. With individuals facing such devastating financial loss, what does Detroit's pension problem mean for city employees and those with pensions across the country? Joining me to discuss this, we have Allison Schrager, an economist and writer, Ashley Woods, our HuffPost Detroit editor, Monica Ross Williams, host of Independent Underground Radio Live, Peter Henning, a law professor at Wayne State University, and Dennis Hunter, a Detroit firefighter. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. And before we get started, I'd like to call out Monica, who left a video comment on the HuffPost Live platform. You can see it right here on my computer. If you click Be an On-Air Guest, you can record a video audition and we can bring you onto the site. So the platform does work, everybody. We do have people on that audition. And Monica, thank you so much for joining us and trying so hard to participate and leaving the audition and tweeting at me. I really appreciate you joining us. Ashley, let's start with you. Fill us in on the latest developments of what's going on with Detroit's bankruptcy case.
Well, basically, they went to bankruptcy court yesterday. The judge had decided that the bankruptcy could move forward and pretty much to consolidate all the cases. So there was a case there was cases that were going on in regards to the pension plans, and they had issued an action in Ingham County Court where the judge, I believe her name was Rosemary Laquita, had put a temporary freeze, that was last Thursday, on letting the bankruptcy move forward. So they had a hearing inside a federal court yesterday, and now the process will move forward. They consolidated all the lawsuits at this current time. They're all in federal court, and they're supposed to have another hearing, I believe, in May. I think it's May 8th. Mm-hmm. So that will be the next hearing on this case.
Ashley,
no, August.
In August. Okay, Ashley, yeah. in your coverage on this for HuffPost Detroit, what are you seeing right now?
Well, it's definitely a win for Kevin Orr. That's Detroit's emergency manager, and he was arguing that Detroit's bankruptcy just couldn't. That all these lawsuits would not only make it very difficult for Detroit to proceed with its bankruptcy case, but would cause it irreparable harm. And Judge Stephen Rhodes, who is a district judge and a bankruptcy judge who oversaw the case, agreed with him. However, I think it's important to understand this doesn't mean that Detroit is bankrupt. It hasn't been declared eligible for bankruptcy yet, and we'll have to go through that process. It also doesn't mean that Governor Rick Snyder did the right thing by signing the state of Michigan's forms and filing for bankruptcy. That constitutional challenge from the state of Michigan still exists. Mm-hmm. It just means that it's going to be examined in federal bankruptcy court and not in the state courts for now.
For those of us who don't know, so the main issue here is that in filing for bankruptcy, it's how much from the pensions can be taken away. Can the city of Detroit sort of reevaluate what it owes people how much debt it owes people, including pensions? And I want someone for our watchers to define exactly what a pension is. Allison, can you do that?
Yeah, so these are defined benefit pensions, which are essentially they're annuities that are going to be promised. So if you are a state worker or a Detroit worker, you're promised some fraction of your salary from the time you retire until the time you die, and that up until now appeared to be guaranteed that you would get that payment every year. And I believe it's indexed as well for inflation.
Mm-hmm. So, Peter, if Michigan's state constitution guarantees pension benefits, how could filing Chapter 9 for the city of Detroit, how could federal law change this?
Well, federal law under bankruptcy governs. So a federal bankruptcy judge is going to make the ultimate decision as to what any of the creditors, not just the pensioners, but also the bondholders, anybody with a claim against the city. It'll be the federal law that governs. And under the Constitution, there's a thing in there called the Supremacy Clause, and that says federal law trumps state law, but it gets even more complicated. There's a provision in the bankruptcy code that says that the federal law doesn't necessarily interfere with state laws about governing a city or its political actions. And that's what Judge Rhodes is going to have to figure out. What's the role of state law in this? What's the interaction between state and federal law? The rule of thumb is federal law trumps state, but that may not be the case here.
So having something that, like this happen to a city as large as Detroit in this country could have widespread ramifications, right? In terms of other cities potentially having to file bankruptcy, such like Stockton, California. We've seen a number of cities in the past having to file bankruptcy, but this is the largest yet.
Well, it's not only the largest, but the issue of the pensions is particularly important because you have a number of municipalities that have underfunded pensions. And if they see that pensions in Detroit can be cut by a bankruptcy court judge, then they can use that as a threat against their own workers to try to solve, or their own retirees too, to try to solve issues of underfunding. And this is a problem throughout the country, that you just can't raise taxes anymore. That's not really a palatable option. And so could the threat of bankruptcy be an option? It's not easy to get into bankruptcy court, but it can be a lever to try to negotiate to reduce pensions, to reduce benefits that were promised years ago.
Without going too far down a rabbit hole, why is it unpalatable to raise taxes if raising taxes could make it so that we don't have to file bankruptcy and remove the pensions of our state employees, like firefighters and police officers?
Well, it's politically unpalatable.
Politically unpalatable, okay.
That you've got, who wants to raise taxes? And also, too, that the problem is retirees tend not to have much of a voice in these types of decisions. You have to raise taxes on current workers. And in Detroit, you have a situation where you have 20,000 retirees and under 9,000 workers. So is that enough to fund it? Does the city raise its taxes? Detroit is at about its limit, and that's going to be true in a lot of places in this country. So politically unpalatable.
So I'm curious, who is going to step in and save these pensions if it's possible? In 2008, Vallejo, California filed for bankruptcy, and they were trying to restructure collective bargaining measures and state pensions. And California's state administrator, the CalPERS, I believe it's called, stepped in and basically saved the pensions and caused Vallejo to sort of to stop doing this. Sorry, this is not my forte, but the CalPERS said that they would go. They threatened litigation, and Vallejo pretty much said, no problem. We won't restructure this. Actually, the pensions aren't even that much money for us. Who can step in for Detroit pensioners at this point, Ashley?
I don't know if there's anybody who can. At this point, the state of Michigan does have, as Professor Henning said, does have it in the Constitution that these pensions are to be protected. But the state of Michigan itself has issued opinions saying that they won't step in and guarantee that money. And it's also important to remember that it's not like the pensions have no money in them and we would be going from whatever your pension is down to zero. These pensions are partially funded, and one would at least hope that some of that money would stay in there, what is funded at this point. But as for somebody else coming forward to say that they're going to put this cash in, it will either require, I think a serious compromise, a ruling from a judge, or the city of Detroit selling off assets.
What kind of assets could they sell off, Monica?
Well, it has been rumored that the Detroit Water Department might be up for sale. Also DDOT, and also might as well say even worse, some of the assets inside of the Detroit Institute of Arts. A story we had broke yesterday, I believe, on the Detroit Free Press, where there were investors from Christine's house going in and looking at the assets inside of the Detroit Institute of Arts. This has been highly controversial. There has been numerous people that have joined in to say that is just not allowed according to our state constitution and also laws inside of our state. And, Belle Isle is a jewel, and to think that could be up for sale, or better yet, a sublease from the state, and taking that away from the city of Detroit voters is definitely scary.
Pulling up a comment right now from Rona Berry Morin. She asks, so while this case is being heard, will people still receive their checks? Allison, are people still going to receive their checks while this case is being heard?
I imagine so. As pointed out, they still have quite a few assets. I think not Fireman, but Detroit, has quite a large assets, and so you can pay them out. I think the question is figuring out how underfunded these really are, and for that you really have to understand, what priority you're getting in terms of debtors, and what it's going to take to make these solvent for the long term.
Dennis, you thank you for joining us. You've been a firefighter for over a decade now. You've got grown kids. Tell me how worried you are at this moment about losing your pension, and if you ever imagined that this could happen after working for over a decade for the city of Detroit.
Well, I've been here with the Detroit Fire Department 14 and a half years, and some of my coworkers, we developed a group called the Public Safety Workers Action Group, which is who I'm representing today. And we feel that as firemen, as police officers, we don't pay into Social Security. And to know that our pensions may be cut is devastating because, that's what we work for. That's what we want to retire after. The average age of a fireman is 64 to 68 years old. Now, some other city workers, they do pay into Social Security, and they also deserve their pensions also. But the thing is, a lot of this is propaganda to a degree because Governor Snyder, along with Kevin Orr, hired a firm from Florida. This firm said that our pension was 60 to 70% funded, but it said this is an estimate. We went to the pension board ourselves. Pension board said our pension is at 96.1% funded.
So where is that 60% number coming from? How are they propagandizing this?
Well, anytime you say it's a guesstimate, you can propagandize anything.
True. Go ahead, Allison.
Well, I think the difference is that the estimates that actuaries at most state plans are putting out really are not based on reasonable accounting standards. They're assuming, first of all, that the assets will return 8% every single year. And not only that, they assume that they can discount their liabilities at that, which really underestimates their liabilities. Like nothing about financial theory says that's appropriate. And what worries me about understating how underfunded these isn't propaganda. It's people like you are going to be really left holding the bag because they'll run through all their assets on current retirees. And by the time you get there, because you've understated how underfunded it is, you're going to be left holding the bag.
Well, Dennis, I'm kind of curious about your emotional response to this. You've given so many years to the city of Detroit. You're a firefighter. You risk your life. I mean, we're at a point right now where it's just been written up that Detroit has an arson problem going on in the city at the moment, and there are less firefighters now than there were 10, 20 years ago. And here you are finding out that your city is about to rip you off.
Well, that's true. We are unfortunately one of the busiest fire departments in the country due to so many things, no jobs, vacant homes, and we can go on and on. Cities around us, they may have 1 or 2 house fires a year. In Detroit, probably for the last 30 years, if you average it out for the year, per year, we have 30 to 40 fires a day. So we put our blood, sweat, and tears on the line, and I don't understand how the country has money for wars, but they can't take care of their own cities. We can bomb a place and rebuild it, but you can't rebuild a city. You can bail out Wall Street, you can bail out the auto industry, but you can't bail out a city. So this is an American problem, and like somebody else said on the panel, this is going to affect and is affecting other cities. So what we really have to look at is, they say our pension is worth over $1 billion with assets and investments. City puts in money, we put in money. These pensions make a lot of money on these investments. They lose a little, but they make a lot. So how I feel right now is I feel nervous. I feel like it's not American. What happens to the American dream when you take away people's pensions?
Do you regret the years of your life that you've given over to the city?
No, I don't regret it. I mean, only the strong survive, so we're going to make it regardless. But when we're talking about principles, we want to always be politically correct and talk about the American way. They don't even want to raise minimum wage. Some people are married and doing all the right things, have families. You can't make it off $9, $10 an hour. And to say that you should go to college and all that to survive in America I think it's ludicrous. If I have a company and we're making millions, I should be able to pay you a decent wage.
Do you think that this is going to deter people from choosing civil service as a job in this country?
Well, it could. I mean, if they don't get this thing together as far as public safety, of course it could.
Yeah.
You know, we serve because we want to. I mean, obviously we want a paycheck and we want to take care of our families. But most public servants, they love what they do. They want to help people. And so it's just our just due to say, you know, leave our pensions alone.
Pulling up a comment right now from Jordan Knutson's Phantom, I think is how you pronounce it. Not only has the tax base in Detroit disappeared, but imposing additional taxes would harm the poorest of the poor in the city who can't even afford to eat at this point. Bondholders must pay for not only do they hold the bulk of Detroit's debt, but they precipitated the cause. Peter, can you respond to that as we were talking earlier about whether the palatableness of raising taxes?
Well, certainly the bondholders are going to take a hit. And what happens in a bankruptcy is it's really about spreading pain. How much pain are you going to take? Because no one comes out of a bankruptcy as a winner. So certainly the bondholders are going to take a hit. It's a question of how much. And with regard to the pensions, Dennis is right that this was promised. And can you renege on a promise? There's not going to be a bailout from Washington here. I think I may be the only one on the panel who remembers the New York City bailout back in the mid-1970s.
I wasn't alive, but I remember the New York Post headline. What was the headline?
Ford to New York, drop dead.
Right.
Well, there is. It's not going to be Obama to Detroit drop dead, but there's no federal bailout. And there was of Chrysler and GM, although the shareholders took a hit there. People are going to take a hit. It's how much of a hit and how fair is it going to be? It's no fun feeling pain. There's not going to be a winner, except, of course, the lawyers.
That's unbelievable. Monica, I mean, hearing Dennis talk about the Wall Street bailout and the wars and the money spent on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, you can't help but feel like why doesn't our country bail out our cities as well? Why don't we at least pay our civil servants what they were told that they would be owed at a certain point? How do you feel about this, living on the ground in Detroit?
Well, I mean, you have to look at it. Civil servants, they are serving all of us. They're serving basically the people. I don't know about a bailout. Unfortunately, even if President Obama wanted to do a bailout, the Republicans in the House have already hinted that not only would they not consider it, but if other cities was to get into this type of difficulty, they wouldn't do anything for them. So, I mean, you're looking at in particularly the GM situation and Chrysler. I would like to talk about those. Obviously, they also did a restructuring bankruptcy. I believe it was a Chapter 11, if I have it correct, more so than a Chapter 9. But they also had the opportunity to continue their pensions. They reduced the amount that they paid on to their dental. And also eliminated the vision for, I believe, up to like 3 years in order to try and get everything restructured. Now, that could be an option in Detroit's case, but that's not what Governor Snyder and Kevin Orr is talking about at the moment. What they're talking about is eliminating the pensions, which kind of is very confusing because if they eliminate the pensions altogether, I have a big question if that comes back on the Federal Pension Guarantee Fund. And if that's the case, then we will all be subject to paying not only Detroit's pensions, but any other municipality that decides to eliminate their pensions to their employees that they promise.
No, state pensions aren't guaranteed by PBGC. It's only corporates. But, this might bring up that perhaps they should be to give people like Dennis some security that he'll at least get something.
So you're saying that a corporate, I'm sorry, but you're saying that corporates are protected, their pensions are protected?
Yeah,
well, they're protected to a degree, not a full pension, but the talk is not to take away the entire pension, but that in fact it will be cut down 10%, 20, 30%. But of course, as Dennis points out, the firefighters and policemen in Detroit don't have the safety net of Social Security. So this is what the retirees are living on. And that would be an enormous hit. So how it's all going to play out remains to be seen, but it'll be a percentage cut, I would expect.
And if I can interject real quick, the retirees.
Monica, interject and give us the last word here. That's okay.
Yeah, the retirees at Ford and Chrysler, as long as they paid into Social Security, they did actually have the backup plan of Social Security to help them live for the rest of their lives until such time that they no longer was living on this earth. If I have it correct from what Dennis said, they haven't paid into Social Security. So what is going to happen to these firefighters? What is going to happen to these police officers? That's a big question when you're talking about eliminating someone's pension.
Allison,
Or even reducing it.
Allison, Ashley, Monica, Peter, and Dennis, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us your story. It's really unbelievable what's happening over there, and we'll check back in with you soon as this story unfolds. You guys, you're watching HuffPost Live. There's a lot more coming up next. I'm Ricky Camilleri.